the story so far was we started with a theory in mind about the Mishkan, but we'll skip that. We started with, the first real text we looked at was the Maharal. The Maharal that we looked at was on the Mishnah about how the world stands on Torah, Avodah, Gemilas, Chasadim. He ends up creating this long list of other things that correspond to Torah, Avodah, Gemilas, Chasadim. Right? There were the elements, there were the avos, there was even Rivka's jewelry. I mean, the whole thing was laid out on Torah, Avodah, Gemilas, Chasadim. But the point that I really want to stick, like the takeaway point to me, was that the three pillars are relationship to your soul or your inherent tov, relationship to Hashem, and relationship to others. And that these three pillars are paradigm mitzvos for perfection, for the tov, these three aspects of tov. So Torah brings you out of this sense of being just a physical being. And to the Maharal, that's the primary purpose of Torah study. Avoda is serving Hashem, and therefore brings us in relationship to Hashem, in particular the Karbanos and subsequently davening. Gemilas Chasadim is obviously the perfection relationship to others. Oh, sorry, I had to let John in. So from there we got to from there, and which he firmly established with lots of examples and coloring and.
No, it's good.
Yes, it would be helpful if you. Oh, never mind. So there's a lot of what's it called? There's coloring and so on from all those examples, and then we have the Gra, and the Gra spoke about three aspects of the soul, which were nefesh, ruach, and neshama. That's the way it's normally given. But here in my little chart, I had to do it in Torah, Avodah, and Gemilas Chasadim order. So because he says that ruach is where the ego resides, and we took that detour to talk about with Rav Dessler from the second chapter of Kuntras Abachira, that the middle space where the air is between heaven and earth is where decision making is done. And by the way, does anybody see the pop-up that just came on my screen? Nope. Okay, great.
No, the thing looks normal.
Okay, no, that's because for the first time I shared the app instead of the screen, because I had noticed that in old recordings, pop-ups come up on the recording. Anyway, back to this. So we have three aspects of the soul, which is nefesh, ruach, neshama. Ruach was the castle in the air of the Agadata we were discussing, where it hangs between heaven and earth. So neshama is our existence in heaven. Nefesh is what happens to a soul that lives in a body. And ruach is what sits in between. And the growth ties to egotism and jealousy as its negative aspects, right? We had the dog barking, making its demands, the person in the middle of their life when they're pursuing, they're building their empire. And that's the gra is what ruach is about. So ruach has a natural correspondence to the tov, the perfection of the self that comes from Torah study. The shama, being where spiritual desires reside, speaks to our relationship to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and nefesh, where the physical desires are, that doesn't speak as well to our relationship to other people. And that's sort of where we were also with that speculation I had with the Kalim, where we had on the level of neshama or of avoda, right, we had two mizbechos, and those corresponded pretty well. On the level of, the one with the crown and one without the crown, On the level of Torah, we had the menorah and the Aron, and those also corresponded very well, and one with the crown, one without the crown. But on the level, but the other two, the one with the crown had to do with bread, and there's shulchan, and the one without the crown had to do with tahara and washing one's hands. John had the idea of bread and water being staples, but where I was going with this was the nefesh, by putting us in this world, gives us the opportunity to relate to other people. And that was the picture I was trying to build. And therefore, the shulchan, the kior corresponds to, trying to stay in this world in a holy way. And the shulchan represents the opportunities that being in this world gives us. And that was how the Maharal and the, up here, I have it down here. That was how the Maharal and the Gra were going to answer the question of why does the Chumash spend all this attention on the utensils? It's because from the perspective of somebody, from the way the Torah was describing the dynamics internal to a person, you could kind of learn how you work by seeing how the Mishkan's described. So that was where I was going with all that. Now, when we were last at the Gra, right? He tied this Agadata about the castle hanging in the air between heaven and earth. He tied it to, well, first of all, to Migdal Bavel. And second, well, actually, first it was to a pasuk in why am I blanking tonight? Yeah. Right. First he had the pasuk in Zechariah with the three women, the two that fly to the woman who is evil, and the two that fly to trap her. And he says that these represent the desires of the nefesh and the ruach. The nefesh, being physical, has the desire for taiva, for physical pleasures, and the ruach, being the mind, and the ego have these desires for kina and kavod. 1 second, I want to make a point after Alan Marinis's audio is on. So he's on. Okay. So after the thing that's interesting, Alan, you came in while I was discussing this row of the table, which is the end of the Gra that we were just learning. So the Gra actually talks about the three midot that take you from this world, kina, taiva, and kavod, and he associates kina and kavod with the ruach, not with the nefesh. This is something Alan and I have discussed in the past. It seems that the Gra and the Ramchal have a little bit of a dispute going on, because Ramchal says that all midos are seated in the nefesh, and here the Gra seems to say that it kind of depends what the desire, what the mida is, and that a person's pursuit of honor, or lahefach, or a person's pursuit of anava, would be the job of perfecting the ruach, not the work of the nefesh. It's okay, because when we look at the same Mishnah in the Maharal, he doesn't agree with the Gra. But we'll see that in a minute. So that's the story so far. We've been pursuing these two pairs of threes, and my theory that is the dynamic that one stream of Torah, one school of Masorah, that's the internal dynamic they give the soul. And we have to be very circumspect that we don't say that is the Torah's description of the soul, because notice that there's only nefesh, ruach, neshama. The Hasidish model where there's a nefesh elokis and a nefesh elokis and a what's it called, a nefesh behamis and a neshama elokis, each of which have their own nefesh ruach neshama inside. That level of complexity is not in this model, so it's not the Hasidic model either, and it may or may not be the Ramchal's. We'll see as we proceed. Anybody need anything before we leave the recap? Except for Alan, for whom the recap was probably not enough because it's not a recap, it's his first cap. Okay, 1 second. There. So what happened was I was telling people before the recording, the Mishnah, I had Avos later, Mishnah, Perek Daled Mishnah Chaf Aleph, at the end of the last sheet, because it talks about Kinataiva and Kavod. But when I was preparing that, it grew into a topic large enough to get its own sheet altogether. So this week, instead of moving on to either of the texts that I was telling you were coming up, we're just going to look at the Maharal again. Because this whole business I was talking about crowns, it's unfair to discuss the Maharal in the 3 crowns without discussing the Maharal on the 3 crowns. So that's going to be, that's Mishnah Yud Gimel, and then from there we'll get to Mishnah Chaf Aleph, which quotes Mishnah Yud Gimel. We're going to get to a discussion of Kinatav and Kavod. And then we'll leave the 3s. I promised that, but things crept up that I didn't want to, that grew into their own topics before. So, given what I just said, I'm kind of, nervous to give you a promise that we'll leave the 3s after this, but I intend to leave the 3s. I think we've kind of done the number 3 to death by this point.
There's a lot of other numbers in Avos. There's 4s, there's 7s, there's 10s, right?
Okay, right. Well, you brought up a interesting detour. So I noted I collect in
unintentional.
davening.
I guarantee you.
No, but I collect when I daven. Here, let me stop sharing long enough because we're chatting and not talking about the texts. I collect when davening. I collect 3s, 4s, 6, 7s, 8s. Those particular numbers come up a lot in davening. 3s tend to be about us. 4s are usually brachos that come to us. Like when we talk about Hashem as a Melech, Ozer, Umoshia, Umogen, because he provides us with 4 gifts. 3s are, well, okay, Avram, okay, Yitzchak, okay, Yaakov. Here's one. Ashrei Yoshvei Veisecha. It refers to those who sit and study Torah. Ashrei Ha'am Shekachalo praises the Jews just for being that kind of nation. And Ashrei Ha'am Shem Elokav. So you have Torah, Gemilas, Chasadim, and Avoda in that order every time you say Ashrei.
That's convincing. Okay.
Right. So I find the 3s are generally about us or what we can do. The 4s tend to be what Hashem could do for us, maybe simply because it's 3 plus 1. It's beyond 3. Then there are things that come in 6s and things that come in 7s. So like Shalom Ra, Sim Shalom, Shalom Tova Uvracha Chaim V'Chesed V'Rachamim. When we ask for things to aid survival, we ask for 6 things, right? But at the end, when we ask for spiritual things, It's Torah's Chaim, Avas Chesed, Staka, Uvrocha, Verachamim, V'Chaim, V'Shalom. We ask for 7 things because there are 6 days of the week, but there are 6 days of the work week, and when you add the 7th day, John is joining twice. When we add the 7th day, we get.
It's transferring from my phone, which I was using while I was finishing dinner, to the big computer in the other room.
Okay, got it.
Recording in progress.
Let me turn this thing on.
Yeah, you have to mute. Oh, now okay, very good. So, right. So I was saying is Torah's Chaim, Avas Chesed, Tzedakah, Bracha, V'Racham, Chaim, Shalom is 7 things. Because when we deal with spirituality, we add Shabbos to the week.
I hear that.
So you find these 6 and 7s. Where we get 8 tend to be things that go beyond the human, like I don't know. Let's say a miracle. Yala v'yavo v'yagia v'yera v'yeratze v'yishama v'yipoke v'yizacher. There are 8 verbs in Yala v'yavo. When we praise God for something that's beyond the week, that's beyond nature. So when I daven, I collect 6, 7s, and 8. 3s, 4s, 6, 7s, and 8s. I'm sure there's plenty of other numbers. I mean, there's 18 brachos, which has to have some kind of significance. I break it down into 3s.
While you're sipping, I'll just throw in that Rabbi Hillel Goldberg is now writing a complete sefer on numbers. Not from a gematria point of view, but exactly what you're doing. I've read through half the manuscript, and it's quite overwhelming because each number can go in these number of directions, and then there are multiples. So if you're talking about 6, 60, 600,000 all related, so also 1/6 and 1/60th. He put all of it together. I'll tell you, it's like not to be read before bedtime. It's just that you don't want to read it as you're heading off to sleep.
Okay, a detour off the detour. I once had the Rav of my shul. I was very red-eyed. He said, "What's wrong?" I said, "Nothing's keeping me up. It just seems to be straight insomnia." So he said, "You should do what I do. Draft the Yetzer Hara to help you sleep." I asked him what that meant. He said, "Go to sleep with the Shelas Achuvas Rabbi Akiva Eger. The Yetzer Hara will make sure you're asleep within minutes."
That's good advice.
But that was his. Anyway, but looking for the threes in davening, you see how this theme repeats beyond where they were, beyond the examples the Maharal gave. So those numbers have meaning to me, so I always look for those numbers. I'm sure people wonder why why when I'm saying modim, I'm going al, but they don't hear that. They just see 4 fingers going up, and a little later 6 fingers go up, and a little later 7 fingers go up. Like I don't know what people who see me in shul think I'm doing, but that's what I do. But I think the detour from the detour, we kind of got to get back on topic. So here's the 3s, and the 3 we started with, right? So this is a full Mishnah, just so that we don't learn half a Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Havei Zahir b'Talmud, Sheshigagas Talmud Ole Zadon. Be careful with Talmud, which is an interesting word for learning. I believe it implies not knowledge, not knowing the halacha, knowing how the halacha came to be. Like we have the Shlish b'Mikra, Shlish b'Mishnah, Shlish b'Talmud, which was written, by the way, before the Mishnah was compiled. It's quoting Rabbi Tarfon. So it was said before, like the book of Mishnah. But in any case, Rambam says that in that context, the Talmud is knowing how the halacha, the process, not the law. Sheshigigas Talmud Ola Zadon, because forgetting Talmud raises sin. Now, it could be that he's saying that the forgetfulness is itself a sin because it's kind of neglectful. It's not a sheer accident. You don't forget things that are important to you. Or because if you don't remember the Talmud, then you're going to sin, because it's one thing not to know the halacha, but if you start extrapolating, not knowing how to extrapolate, you could go really, really far afield. Either way, that's the first half of the Mishnah. Our half of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon are often paired. The halacha is always like Rabbi Yehuda. When there's machlokas Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, with known exceptions. I think what's it called? What was the mitzvah shein tzrich legufa is one of these famous machlokas in Rabbi Yehuda. Anyway, Rabbi Shimon Omer, shlosha ksarim heim. So this is, remember, this is the person that Zohar is attributed to. Says there are 3 crowns: Keser Torah, Keser Kuna, and Keser Malchus. Right, we started with this Mishnah, right? The crown of Torah, crown of Kuna, crown of Malchus, Keser Shem Tov Ola Al Gabehen. So that's the Mishnah, right? We have Torah, Kuna, and Malchus, which in our parlance has become the crown of perfecting oneself, the crown that one gets perfecting the relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, and the crown one gets when one is perfect in the relationship to others. But let's see how the Maharal himself takes it. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Gimel Ksarim Haim. Yesh Lishel. You have to ask. Mash Amar Gimel Ksarim V'lo Dal Amar Dal Ksarim. How could he say that there are 3 crowns if he then says there's a 4th crown that's on top of them? The Iker HaKeser, and the essential crown, Shu Keser Shem Tov, Lo Chashiv. How is that not counted? He just said Ola Al Gabehem, and yet then it doesn't make the count. Vod Kasha, it's also hard. The Mikdash Haya Keneged Kol Ksarim Kli. In the Mikdash, every crowned vessel had a keli. Merames Al Kol Keser V'Keser, reminding you of each crown. Sharay al ha'aron hayazer, shu keser simon lekeser Torah. The crown of the aron is to remind you the crown of Torah. While yazer al shulchan, who simon lekeser malchus. Shulchan who remez al hamalchus. Right, the shulchan, by supplying bread for all 12 shvatim, is the sign of Malchus, and Kamo Shamru Shulchan Shal Malachim. That's why it's a table, because kings have a huge table that they feed the whole court. Vayazerah Mizbeach, and there was a crown on the golden Mizbeach, Siman Lekeser Kahuna, and that's a sign for the crown of the Kohanim, of the priests. Kamo Shamru, I don't want to say priests, that's just autopilot, of the people who do avoda. Kamosha Amru b'Masechet Yuma Akol Elu Gimel Ksarim, and we saw that Gemara as well. Elu Keneged Keser Shem Tov Hu Al Kol Ksarim. The Elu Keneged Keser Shem Tov Hu Al Kol Ksarim Lo Haya b'Mikdash. How could it be that Keser Shem Tov, which is supposed to be greater than all 3, did not have a crown representing it in the Beis HaMikdash? Good question, no? Same question, really. I mean, what he's asking is, why is Keser Shem Tov demoted from the other crowns when it seems to be the more important of all 4? Okay, the Midrash Rabos, many Midrashim, or maybe he means many Midrash Rabbos, Amru Parshas Naso. It just struck me. Maybe his edition of Medrash Rabbah was
I think it's just Medrash Rabbah. I've seen them called Medrash Rabbos because I guess there's 5 of them, or plus the Megillas.
Or perhaps many midrashim.
But then wouldn't you say Midrashim?
I don't know. I have no idea. Amru b'parshas naso. Ki ha-menorah merames keser shem tov. The menorah is the keser shem tov. Ki shem tov hu al misha hu ba'al mitzvah. Because shem tov comes to somebody who's busy doing mitzvos. L'zeu ha-menorah ki ner mitzvah v'torah or. That's the menorah because the light of the menorah is sorry, the ner is the mitzvah that is the keser shem tov. Lefichach ha-menorah hu mora al keser shem tov. Therefore, the menorah is the keser shem tov. Vasi shapir mashama keser shem tov olal gabehem, and therefore it works when it says that the keser shem tov is on top of all of them. Kemenorah gam kein hi al kol elu shalosh kelim. There's 2 problems with this that I had before I got to paragraph 9. Oh, by the way, we skipped paragraphs 1 through 6, which were about Rabbi Yehuda. So anybody catch something that doesn't quite fit the Maharal's way of looking at it? Why he's going to have problems with the Medrash? What's the Mishnah about? 3 watts.
Crowns, 3 crowns.
Right, and then the Gemara says that each of the zer in the mikdash is to evoke one of those 3 crowns. Nor doesn't have a crown.
So he used the word that represents, right? If you scroll up a little bit, I did notice that.
By the way, can you see my mouse?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I do have a pointer. Good.
Kamener Merames, it alludes to, right?
Right.
If you scroll up a little more, we could see, is that the same language used by the other 3?
Sheshulchan hu remez al
Oh,
hamalchus.
he did Merames.
He does.
And then, yeah, he does. No, so that's I was.
But no. But
I withdraw.
No. But it's not. I'm wrong. Al Aron haYazer shu keser siman. He says siman lekeser Torah. Zera shulchan v'hu siman lekeser malchus. The shulchan is merames to malchus because of the word shulchan, but the zer he says is a siman. The keser is a siman for the keser. It's not. Okay.
Well, if you want to say that the other 3 are a part of that keli, and this one, which is Oila al Kulan, is the entire keli by itself, right? The zer of the shulchan and the zer of the menorah and the zer of the mizbeach and the zer of the aron, those were just a part of it. Here he's saying that the Keser Shemta, which we also said is Oila al Kulam, is for the entire menorah.
Okay, it could be. I'm not sure how strong we want to defend the Medrash. I mean, or the Maharal wants to defend the Medrash. We should defend the Medrash.
Okay.
It's Chazal, right? But we're learning the Maharal, so I'm not really sure how much we're going to end up going with the Medrash. Because this is what the Maharal says. Avol lefia nira ein ze meikar hamedrash klal v'hu min hatosafos sheba'u b'medrash beina min hamedrash. So he just says, nah, it's a later edition. right. Critical theory here. It's not part of the original. It's not part of the original Medrash Rabbah. It can't be. No, I'm just writing it off. And is what the language. This is the way the language seems. You'd have to ask. Kol shkein. Hare lo haya keser al menorah. V'yaroyi liyos keser al menorah. If this is so, where's the crown on the menorah? V'zeh yesh liyashev. So you could answer this. Kaneros hayu olin lama'ala od. The candles, the not the candles, the wicks, the flames. They weren't candles, they were lamps. The lamps go up more. Kedichsiv lahalos ner tamid. Right, the ner tamid, the verb being used is lahalos. Right, bahalos chayasaneros. Lefichach iyasher liyos keser menorah. So the menorah couldn't have a keser because the whole point of the flames is to be above the menorah itself. Feel bad for Bev. If she wants to listen in, why don't she sit down? Okay. Given Shaner Haya Malamin, is there Ev Shalios Kesser al Menorah, Kivan Shaner Haya Ola Malamin Azer, Im Haya Zer. The Ner would have to be above the crown of the menorah if had the menorah had a crown. Vein Doma L'Shulchan, Shayu Alechem Munachalav. It's not like the shulchan, which had the bread going above the zer, where the bread was on the shulchan. Kilo shayach ola belechem, because lechem doesn't have that verb ola, go up. Flames naturally go up. Bread rests on. Vafilu im haya lechem ola alazer. Even if the bread went up from the crown, kivan shalechem haya munach al hashulchan. Since the bread rested on the shulchan, the zer ola lamala min shulchan, and the zer went up from the shulchan. Hine hazer haya al halechem. He's giving an interesting definition of al here. No, he's saying that the bread rests on the table, therefore the bread is down. The crown goes up from the table, therefore the crown is above. The fact that the bread ends up higher than the crown doesn't change the idea that the crown is al halechem. So he's willing to have a zer on the shulchan, because with that definition of al, the zer could be on the bread too. The zer being the one thing that goes up as opposed to the bread, which falls down. Aval beneros shayach ola, but flames do naturally rise. By lamps, there is an idea of ola, to go up. Shari ksev lahalos ner tamid. The ein roi sheyiya ola ala keser davar, but it wouldn't be appropriate for something to be going up above the keser. Rimnei shekeser shein tov ola ala kol ksev lahalos ner tamid.
How was the zer on top of the bread? I thought the bread was on the racks, and the racks were over the
Yeah, right. That's why I was
right.
That's why I was trying to explain. He has an interesting definition of the word al.
Mm-hmm.
The Maharal is saying that bread goes down, the crown goes up. So from the same surface, you have one thing that may be physically higher, but is falling. One thing that may be lower, but it's going up from the surface. Therefore, it's al. It's creative.
It's creative, yeah.
It's creative.
So
No, but it also would show that it's not a here. Let's think. What's the problem with the flames of the menorah being higher than the zer? Is it that they're higher or that it goes up above? The bread isn't going up above the crown. It's less of a impingement of the royalty of the crown if it happens to be higher, but it's going down. You know what I mean? Like the crown goes up, but the flame goes up more. Like that is like outdoing the crown in a way that the bread can't, because the bread's not going up more. It's not going up at all. That's, I think, how he's understanding al, whether you like the argument or not. I mean, that's the Maharal's argument. I'm not saying that it's convincing or unconvincing. But this is why he says, even if the bread goes up above the zer, since it's resting on the shulchan, haya al halechem. He's using al as ole to be a verb form of ole more than being on. I think it's, as I said, if you think of it in terms of outdoing, the flame could outdo the crown by going higher than the crown. The bread is just higher. It's not outdoing the crown because it's not going up like the crown goes up. I can't really make a stronger argument than that because I understand your problem. I'm just trying to understand the Maharal on his own terms, not whether or not I personally, would have come up with this argument. But Ode,
But it is saying that he's not discounting the medrash completely. He's just saying the part of the medrash that says is there, but he is still saying that Keser Shem Tov does parallel to the menorah, correct?
So far it seems that way, yeah.
Okay.
But remember, he raised two questions. One is why isn't there 4 crowns?
Right.
Right? Why are we counting only 3? So there's going to be something else going on with why the Keser Shem Tov is not parallel to the other 3. Not just above the other 3, but it's not being discussed in the same terms as the other 3.
Understood.
Okay, that's the best I could do without a spoiler. Va'od ki hakeser hu tachlis hamadrega v'hamayla shel bal hakeser. The crown is the culmination of the level and the going up of the person who possesses the keser. It's overly literal, right? The crown obviously represents the ultimate, right? The king is not just the best leader; it's the top leader.
Can I interrupt for 1 second?
Yeah, of
We
course.
have the Aron, right? And the Aron has a crown. The Aron has kruvim. The kruvim do go up.
Maybe I'm thinking out loud. Maybe the Maharal considers the kapores separate from the Aron.
Maybe that could be. That could be. Okay, I could buy that.
The ode ki keser huta. Oh yeah. V'chol keser min elu gimel kesarin yesh lo tachlis v'sof. Each of these 3 crowns has a culmination and an end. It's interesting that he considers those 2 different things. Ki ad kach hu magia. That's where he reaches. Like an end is you reach the end. Right? Tachlis is more you reach the goal. I mean, that's what the words would mean to me, right? Like halos.
Purpose.
You both repeat yourselves at the same time, so I didn't get it better the second time. The first. Purpose, yeah. Tachlis is tachlis is purpose is great for show brachos because then you can talk about a kala, same shoresh. It's a lot better of a show brachos speech.
You can also say she's a business person, but you can go anywhere with that.
I was gonna say it's a lot better than kala finishes you. Ki ad kach. Okay. Ufichach efsher sheyiya keser mora al gimel ksarim elu. So therefore, it's possible for there to be a keser which lords over these 3. Aval keser shem tov ein tachlis v'sof l'keser hazeh. It doesn't have an end. Ki ola lamala lamala. It goes up and up. Umispashet le'ein sof, and reaches the infinite. Hashem Yisparach. That ain't sof. Kamoshe Yispaer. Lefichach ein roi sheyiya keser lemenorah. Therefore, it's inappropriate for that the menorah has a keser. Shumora al Shem Tov, which symbolizes the good name. Rachsiv lahalos ner tamid. To rise up the ner eternally, the ner tamid. Ki hakeser hazos ola lamala lamala tamid. This crown is continually going up more and more up. Ki ein sof l'keser hazeh. V'chach lo haya keser b'mikdash mora keser shem tov she'im kain haya tachlis gvul ala keser. So he's saying Keser Shem Tov is not just greater than the other three; it's infinite. I once heard a shir on KMTT that's out of Gush Etzion, and Stalling's not going to help. The way my memory is going tonight, I'm not going to pull up the name of the Maggid shir. He gave the line, the most transcendent thing about man is our very ability to transcend. No matter how great a person gets, we're finite. So you never actually get closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu because, right, you've only done an infinitesimal step compared to the infinity, right? It's just not there. But the fact that we can become what we weren't, right, that we can choose to be what we want to be, that ability to transcend is the very Tzelem Elokim that it is to be human, right? That we can be what we want to be and not what we are. Or closer to what we want to be and not just stay what we are. So I hear this in his description of Keser Shem Tov. Keser Shem Tov is not a crown like the other three crowns, because a crown is what you give the top ruler. It's what you give the king. It's what you give the Kohen. It's what you give, right? What you give the Gadol Ador. It's not it's an accomplishment, which means that you've reached a goal. It doesn't represent an endless journey. Keser Shem Tov Ola al Gabehem, because it is the endless journey. There is no tachlis. There's no end. There's no sof. There's no gvul, as he put it. So you don't really get to a keser. It's more appropriate that to have a flame. And every day you light the flame. Because the flame just goes up continually and endlessly.
Don't we usually look at Torah as being infinite or endless?
Yeah, but is a
distinct from Kuna and Malchus. You're a Kain, you're not a Kain. You're a Kain doing that Vaida. Maybe Kain Gadol is the ultimate expression of Kuna, right? Malchus, you're a king, off the head, right? But Torah, you keep on going in.
Right. I hear.
But it's not entirely limitless because, if it were limitless, then, we could all be antinomians. Do whatever the hell we wanted and say it was Judaism.
No, that doesn't mean that wouldn't make it limitless.
Endless.
Right. And right. I hear.
Maybe we can't individually, reach the end of all knowledge that there is, but
I was
if
trying
our
to
knowledge
think.
known or is the same, then that's all Hashem anyway, which is infinite.
Yeah. The truth is, the Kohen Gadol and the Nasi or Av Beistin are in different positions, right? Because today's Av Beistin could be tomorrow's Av Beistin, who knows more than he knew yesterday. Whereas a Kohen Gadol can never be more than the Kohen Gadol.
Right. And
he could, though.
Actually, just a thought. I was thinking, when you showed the table, you were mentioning that Torah is related to self-perfection, and that matches nicely with what Moshe is saying about Torah being, let's say, infinite. It does allow for always future development, but when you talk about Shem Tov, you're talking about something aspirational. You want to improve yourself all the time. It beyond, of course, Torah is the way to go to do it, but still, you could think of it being something more dynamic. I'm not sure. And just one last thought. I just mentioned I was playing around with the top of the Sefer of the Etz Chaim, and I realized that it does match with what the Maharal is saying about from Shem Tov. You actually do go to Ein Sof. Not in exactly those words, but Yeah, it was not that lost. Just a thought.
Mhm.
That perhaps it just
Regarding
works
what
out.
you said,
Ariel,
Sorry?
you started.
about the Kohen Gadol being in a state of finality, not being able to go further. It's interesting. Rav Lopiansky some years ago cited, I think it was a Ramban, about the Kohen Gadol can't be Matame himself for their close relatives, because in a sense he's already in Shemai. Because I mean, everyone theoretically accepts condolences. I mean, like, obviously, on a theological level, you shouldn't be sad because they're in Olam Haba, but there's a legitimate part of grief that has to be felt. But the Kohen Gadol is already so much a part of Olam Haba, I guess, that he doesn't or shouldn't experience the same grief, because he's already as far as he can go. He's supernal in a sense. I think that's the Ramban.
Mhm. I'll email Rav Aaron and ask.
There's another way of looking at this, and I'm not sure it disagrees with anything anyone just said, but there's a difference between the first three and the fourth, and that is that the first three are all internal. They come from inside. You're either a Kain, that's you. You're defining yourself. Your attribute is defining yourself, and Keser Shem Tov is really defined by the people around you, right? And maybe that's why Keser Shem Tov is limitless, because it can keep on getting bigger and better as you have more influence or more reach over the world, right? And you could become Keser Torah, you could become greater at Torah, but that's all you. That's not outside you.
I hear. I was thinking about this though while we were talking. There's a limit to how much kahuna a person can get, right? But if you remember the Maharal talking about avoda as a relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, now you could always grow in avoda. You may not be able to grow in kahuna, but you could always grow in avoda. You may not be able to grow in. I think we're being thrown by the fact that the Keser Torah is being used to describe Torah. Keser Kahuna is being used to describe avoda, which is a different word. But you could grow. The truth is, all three of them are infinite, right? Keser Malchus is the person who is great at Gemilas Chasadim, right? The paragon of Gemilas Chasadim. Then, yeah, there's infinite progress in that as well, right? I think what it's saying is there's an office that you could reach. You could reach Kohen. Well, not you, but there are people who reached Kohen. There are people who reached Melech. There are people who became the Av Beis Din or whatever, the Gadol Adar, whatever the equivalent is now. But the growth in all of them are infinite. So you could get the crown of Torah at a definite point in your life. I'm not sure that.
Keser Shem Tov.
Yeah, Ariel, you're not the only Levi in the room. Actually, this may be a strange room with the Levim outnumber the Israelim.
Oh, really?
I think so. John, you Israel or a Levi?
Levi, see? I just want to see.
And Alan's a Levi, no? Right?
I mean, I might be a Levi come lately, but I'm a Levi.
I'm just a humble Israel. Just
yeah.
run of the mill.
Now, Tina hasn't spoken up yet, so I don't know if either she or Rick hail from Levi.
Mm-hmm.
But
She wrote on the chat. She's Israel.
We break the tie. It's
As
Israel
am I.
all the way. Sorry, guys.
Okay, we win. We win. Ha. Okay, but we got close. That's all. Now back to this. So we were looking at the three crowns. So I'm not really sure what he means by limitless, because the Keser Malchus, in terms of the Beinanim Chavero that Malchus is supposed to represent, is just as infinite as Torah. So I think we should continue reading. I think it's a good question, maybe to bring up again if the Maharal doesn't satisfy us with where he goes. Now, here's a Koheles. Here's Koheles Rabbo, which is why I thought originally that Rabbos meant he was going to raise multiple Medrash Rabbos, John, because I knew he raised two. So, Amar Rishima Bar Yochai, Chaviv Shem Tov Me Aron Abris. Shem Tov is more dear than the Aron. Sha'aron Abris lo halach lifneim rak shlosha yamim. The Aron only went 3 days walk ahead of the Jews in the Midbar. Shem Tov olam mesof olam va'ad sofo. But a person could get a good reputation from one end of the world to the other. Minalan, how do we know this? Mi David Shenamar, V'yitzei Shem David b'chol aratzos. David's reputation reached all the lands. Hashem nasan pakto al kol hagoyim, and Hashem brought his fear on all the nations. Adkan. Ubeir davar zeh, explaining this, ki keser Torah, the crown of Torah, b'masha seichel nivdal min ha'olam. This is what we ha'adam. This is what we saw when we looked at Torah as a pillar. That he's focusing on Torah as developing the mind separate from the rest of the person, right? Like Torah gave you the ability to get beyond being a body. That to him was the essence of what Torah was. A divine wisdom is pure wisdom, not detached from physicality. It would keep you from just being yet another mammal. And therefore, the Aron did not walk within the camp, Shal Yisrael. It was carried in front of the Bnei Yisrael. And this is like a person. Ha'adam, the seichel is also separate than a person from the rest of the person. Ve'ino mutba ba'adam achamri, and it's not. This is a hard word. I wasn't really sure how to translate it. Mutba means could be to be coined. It could be to be natural, but it's not stamped out with the rest of the physical person, or it's not a natural part of a person. It's one of those two.
It could be from a language of teveya, of drumming, right?
It could be.
Right.
It could be. I'll go with that one also. I mean, my two also like fit the context. I can't.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. And it could be that the Maharal was intentionally engaging in wordplay and he meant all of them. I mean, there's a poetic, if you ever noticed his repetitions, I haven't really spent time on it because poetry is not my strong suit. But have you ever noticed that there are some points he repeats like 4 different ways? And some points he only makes once? The Maharal plays with poetic phrasing. He's trying not to just impart an idea. Me, I'm focusing on the ideas. But he's trying to give an emotional he's trying to give an emotional grounding to the idea as well. So there are ideas that he repeats for poetic purposes. The Davarza Hayadoma. We were okay. I jumped up a line because Alan said goodbye and it caught my eye. Yesh kana hakesher. There is a tie. They're tied together. Shemekushar haseichel ba'adam. Right, that the brain, the mind is a tie that ties that ties the seichel into the person. And that's why it says that the Aron Bris Hashem went before them 3 days. Mahalach Gimel Yamim Adayin Yeshlo Kashur El Oso Shehu Achrav. 3-day walk, there's still a connection to that which is behind you. We're going to go 3 days in the desert, and then we'll come back. Remember this line we gave Paro, right? We're going to just go for 3 days, worship God, and come back. 3-day trip, you still feel like there's some kind of connection to where you started. They didn't want to totally leave. So you see from Paro's response that a 3-day trip was not considered distant. And therefore the Aron wasn't totally, it was separate, but connected. Aval Keser Shem Tov ein lo davar ze klal. Keser Shem Tov does not have that. Raku misofa olamad sofo. It goes from one end of the world to the other. Kamoshi Yisbar, which we'll see. Ki roi sheyiyeh Hashem Tov misofa olamad sofo. It's appropriate for Shem Tov to go from one end of the world to the other. Lefichach ein roi sheyiyeh keser al menorah klal. Therefore, it's inappropriate for the menorah to have a crown. King gavul keser azos. It's not really a crown in the sense of the other crowns because it's limitless. Raksiv lalos ner tamid shu ola tamid. So instead of having a crown which is finite, it has a ner which is endless. Right? Every day you're making it go up again. We're okay before I start the next paragraph? Ba'od. Okay, I'll say hi to Rav Aaron for me. I wouldn't have, Ariel, if I wouldn't known you were there, I wouldn't have said I'd email him. Just ask Rav Aaron when you see him. Where in the Ramban he saw that. Thanks. Ba'od, ein roi sheyiyeh keser lemenorah. Another reason why the menorah shouldn't have a crown. Ke keser azos mishuna min sha'ar haksarim. It's different than the other crowns in another way. So one way we said is because it goes from the end of the world to the end of the world, and it's not, just tied to be near the person. Kishar haksarim hamala nimtza b'bal hakeser atzmo. The level is internal to the person. This is why when Moshe started talking about this, I said, let's go to the Maharal and see what he has to say. Because you were foreshadowing a little too much, and I thought maybe we should see it inside.
Spoiler.
Right? You acquire Torah, it's in you. Kahuna is a property of the person. Malchus is a property of the person. Hakol nira v'nirgash b'bal hakeser. They're all felt in the person who has the crown. Aval Baal Shem Tov, somebody who has a Baal Shem Tov. I remember this is Maharal, so I don't even know if anybody was calling themselves Baal Shem Tov yet. But Rabbi Yisrael definitely wasn't. Eina Shem Tov nimtza b'Baal Shem Tov. The Shem Tov is not inherent in the person. Kima yada Baal Shem Tov min Hashem Tov asher yesh lo eitzal acherim. Because a person who's a true Baal Shem Tov is not overly concerned and oblivious to what other people think of him. So I believe implied in the Maharal's words here is, how do you know if you're a Baal Shem Tov? Well, if you're busy watching other people to know whether or not you have a good reputation, you're not there yet. Because Ma yada Baal Shem Tov min Hashem Tov asher yishlo eitzal acherim. I mean, okay, you could give less less spirit, less whatever, profound ways of reading this. Like all the Baal Shem Tov would know is what people tell him his reputation is. So how could he ever get a straight answer? He doesn't need to be
know
anything
what people think of you if you don't have, TMZ or Drudge Report or whatever. Pick your
Oh,
poison.
you could ask. You could see.
You think the Vilna guy knew what people 3 towns over thought of him?
Well, if when he visited 3 towns over, everybody stood up and 1,000 people came to Shiurim, you think he didn't notice? Never mind the grow of the Baal Shem Tov. Alan, you think Alan does? I mean, Alan would never talks about how he created an entire movement. But you think he doesn't realize it when his organization attracted so many people? He had to get a board and he had to get this and he had to, so I don't know. I mean, the thing is though that I think when you're dealing with real people, you never know if you're not dealing with flatterers.
Okay, I hear that.
Therefore, it's again inappropriate for the menorah to have a crown. Shimkein hayamora hakeser azos sheyesh hamala b'menorah atzma, because the crown will be part of the menorah, and therefore it would imply that the perfection of Shem Tov is in the menorah itself. Kiyesh keser ba'atzmo shel bal hakeser. There's the crown in itself of the crown is of the possessor of the crown. In other words, the Zer is part of the menorah. So it would be saying that the crown of somebody with Shem Tov is in the person. But davar ze eino klal, and it's not at all. Ki keser shel Shem Tov hu nimtzeses al acherim. It's by others. Lo etzel bal Shem Tov. Fichach pashut hu she'ein roi she'yeh keser b'kli shu Maharal bal hakeser. So, contrary to what we were taught, my little model, the Maharal is saying the menorah is not the space in which the perfection of the menorah of the Aron happens. The menorah is the Keser Shem Tov. It just doesn't have a Keser because Keser Shem Tov goes beyond normal crownedness. So that's the let me try to get one more sentence in, Moshe, okay?
Okay.
This is the answer to why it says there are 3 crowns. Why? Because Kesher Shem Tov is not a crown in that sense of the word. It's not a self-contained perfection. I'm going to try to argue, Moshe, once you leave, that Kesher Shem Tov is about relationship. It's not what other people think of you. It's it's the connection between you and other people. Okay, that's where I hope to be going while you're gone.
Okay. I'm sorry. I can hear that. I'm sorry for dropping off. I'm gonna go.
Okay. Try to save the world. Okay, Shekain Perusho. This is the explanation. Gimel Ksarim Haim or Gushim. Venerin. Everybody sends me emails at 9:09. Haim or Gushim Venerin La'ain Hakol. There are 3 crowns that are felt and visible to everybody. Ki Torah Keser Murgeshes Bo, the Bala Torah. The Torah, you see the crown in the possessor of Torah. Shaladam Chachmaso Ito, Torah Soimo. You ask him a question, he knows it. I mean, the Torah is with him. V'cheina Kahuna. Similarly, whether somebody's a Kohen, V'cheina Malchus. Kolak Serm Nirim Murgashim. They're all visible and tangible. V'keser Shem Tov Eina Mugash V'eino Nikar. V'fichach Lo Haya Keser B'Menora Kivan She'eina Keser Nikar. We're okay with this. Okay. So his argument is that there are 3 crowns, 3 kinds of perfection. I mean, they still correspond to 3 kinds of perfection. And then there's Kesher Shem Tov, which is beyond the self, and therefore isn't really a crown in the same sense as the first 3. That's why it's not, there are 4 crowns. There are 3 crowns, and Keser Shem Tov Ole al Gabehem. And remember, his whole talk about a crown is Ole, a crown goes up. So Keser Shem Tov goes up from these 3 crowns. That's going to be a significant point. The Kasha,
It sounds like the Kesser is both there and not there. Like it says, Lo haya keter b'menorah kivan she'ein haketer nekar. There was no keter on the menorah because the keter isn't recognizable, but that doesn't mean it's not there.
right? So,
Of course, it's sort of, it could be Emperor's New Clothes, but that's the other side.
no. He's saying the reverse. He's saying that this is such a lofty crown, calling it a crown the way you call it the other crowns is not fair. It's not the Emperor's New Clothes. It's like everybody else has clothes and the Emperor has a soul. So you can't see the Emperor's soul. That metaphor didn't work. I take back that. But yeah.
Yeah.
The Kasha Ode. One more question. Ima menorah he menorah mora keser shem tov. If the menorah teaches the keser shem tov, machar shekeser shem tov ola al gabehem, and since the keser shem tov is above all of them, lama menorah einu b'kodesh hakadashim. Why is the Aron in the Kodesh HaKodashim, not the menorah? Kama Aron shu lifnei v'lifnim. The Gamze Eino Kasha, and that's not a real question. Kil Kaklo Haisa Menorah Lifnei Lifnim. There's the very reason why the menorah wasn't Lifnei Lifnim. Keditznan, Ki Kol Shechachmaso Kodemes Lamaisav. One whose wisdom comes before his actions. Ein Chachmaso Miskayemes. The Kol Shemasav Kodemes Lachachmaso. Chachmasa miskayemes. Anybody remember that Mishnah?
Well, he just says it's Bergamot Mishnah does.
Yeah, I know, but it's not what I mean.
Yeah.
How would you say Chachmasa Kodemes Lamaisov?
His wisdom precedes his actions. I mean, does it mean that
Yeah, but
it's more important than, or does it mean that he doesn't do stuff until he thinks about it?
see, that's what I
rather
thought
than a
that.
sort of Nasav and Nishma sort of approach.
Okay, that is that's exactly where I was going.
Yeah.
That he's expecting to understand something before he does it, and therefore he loses his wisdom. So he's only doing those things that make sense to him, and not doing things in order to learn from the experience. That's the way I took it, but I wasn't sure enough. So I didn't want to throw out my idea before hearing somebody else, because, the way this platform is working, once I give my idea, everything else is in relation to that idea. And I wasn't sure enough that I wanted to put my idea down first. But yeah, that's the way I took it too. That it's Nasev and Nishma. It's you need to be doing in order to learn from the experience, not expecting to know and then do what you already understand. That limits what you can accomplish, because you're not going to learn from experience. You're never learning from experience because you're only putting out what you already know. There's nothing to learn from what you just did.
You have to put yourself out there and see what happens, basically.
Right. Lefichach kodem hamenorah hamora el hamaisa, before the menorah, which teaches about action. V'achar kach hu magia el ha'aron lefnai v'lefnim. Oh, and then he can reach the menorah, which is within. So he's saying Keser Shem Tov is related to action, right? Why, we could discuss in a second. And therefore, it's mitzvah, right? Kiner mitzvah. Torah or is sitting in the Kodesh Kodashim after you passed the action. So thought is coming after the action.
I think it's Lefanai Lifnei. I mean, I know we most people seem to say it's Lifnei, but I think it's like it's
Before me,
before Hashem, and Lifnim, it's inside the heart of the Beis Mikdash, inside the Kodesh.
I hear. But the The other thing I wanted to note was that he is placing action with Shem Tov. What you know, nobody else is. What creates a good reputation is what you're doing in the world. He doesn't say this. He's leaving this implied, right?
Mhm.
The menorah is Maisa, and Maisa is Shem Tov. And now all the crowns are in a logical order. Chilas hakol hamizbeach, v'davar zeh ki kodem sheyada b'ravatov nolad b'kuhuna. Why is the kahuna first? Well, you're born into the kahuna. Before you even know good and evil, you're already a Kohen. But din kahuna love chol davar, and that newborn is a Kohen for all things. Day one, not day one, because you shouldn't give a newborn wheat. But day one, the kid could eat truma, right? I mean, she'uzeru gedolim al aktanim. The adults have to make sure that the youth keep all the laws of kahuna. No let a Kohen b'kedushaso, and a Kohen is born with the kedusha of a Kohen. And then he does the mitzvah. Kenegdo hashulchan shehu malchus, and that's shulchan, which is malchus. This is not okay. This is not the menorah, which I'm pointing out here something. He'll explain it, but I'm pointing out here something, okay? Humagia lasos a mitzvos. He just said that mitzvos was the menorah, because mitzvos is keser shem tov. But now he's saying, no, that's a shulchan shu malchus. It's the other side of the room. It's the shulchan, which is malchus. Ki elu shem shnei devarim heim ba'im biyachad. Lasos mitzvah. Mitzvos, doing mitzvos, lios melech mishashu chayiv mitzvos, and to be a king from the moment he is bar mitzvah and obligated in mitzvos. Then he could start, really seriously acquiring Torah. And it is by itself in the inner, in the Kodesh HaKodashim. Kol Keseder, and everything's in order. So I believe what he's saying is that he doesn't mention the menorah. He mentions the Aron, and then the Shulchan and the thing with the mitzvos happen at the same time. And then you reach the Torah. So I think he's saying that the menorah and the shulchan go together because malchus and chi of mitzvos go together. Not that the shulchan is the mitzvos to the exclusion of the menorah being the mitzvos.
I suppose it could be like a physical and spiritual sort of thing. I mean, the menorah is,
Beinam l'makom,
spiritual reaching, Beinam l'makom, and the shulchan is bread, which again is food.
Well, right, and the shulchan.
Hashem, but,
and he's identifying the shulchan with malchus, so it's beinam l'chaver. Yes. Umashelo amar v'keser amasim ulal gabeim. You know what? Let's not go there. Let's leave Tesvav for. No, we could probably do it. Okay. Umashelo amar v'keser amasim ulal gabeim. Why does it say Kesher Shem Tov and not Kesher Masim? Shari b'chol makom Amar Kol shechachmasam miruba memasav. Right? That anybody who's more wise than they act. V'lama Amar Kesher Shem Tov. So if you're supposed to act more than you think, that's not really what I want to say. If it's more important to act than to think, right? The point of thought is to bring more deed, right? And the Kesser, the menorah, is the Kesser Shem Tov because menorah is the Ner Mitzvah. So why isn't it called Kesser Masim? Why is it called Kesser Shem Tov? How is action better than the others? Because action is what gives a Shem Tov. The Shem Tov Olal Kol. So it's not Masim as Masim that are Olal Kol. It's Masim as the source of a Shem Tov, which is Olal Kol. Va'od kasha lama keser Shem Tov Olal Gabehem. Why is it above them all, or resting on their backs? Afal gav sha'amru lo medrash ikar el hamasa ikar. By the way, I don't remember the second ikar in the Mishnah. The medrash is not the essence; the action is. Aval bevadai masha amar keser Torah lo amru she'ein lo masim. Can possibly mean that keser Torah is without action. Devadai ki agavnan lo keser uklal. That's not what Torah is about. That's not keser Torah at all. So it has to be that keser Torah implies the person who's also doing what they know. V'myesh bo ma'asim, and if it has action, v'yesh lo shnei ksarim, and he has two crowns, hayanir ki keser Torah yoser min hamasim. So keser Torah has to be greater than the keser of actions, because a keser of Torah would imply that there's some action too. You know, A plus B has to be greater than B unless A is negative. But, you know, if it's a superset and it includes everything in the first set, it has to be bigger. It's a proper superset. How's that? The Ein Zeh Kasha, the Keser Shem Tov, Hainu Kishiesh Lo Masim, Muflagim Biyoser. It doesn't just mean that he does what he said. He's doing incredible things. Masim Kamo Elu Mevim La Adam Shem Tov. And that's what brings a person a good reputation. They Olim Lamala Mikol. They rise above all of it. We'll deal with the next aval, which is a good. So this is a better place to stop, which is why I pushed to try to get the one more paragraph in. But you notice that I'm trying to insert the idea that Shem Tov has to do with relationship, right? That the first three crowns are accomplishments that can be inherent in the person. And the Keser Shem Tov is how others think of him, because it's all about the relationship they have with the other people. Or with God. I mean, we were talking relationships, right? Relationship, yeah, we had three kinds of relationship, right? How you perfect yourself, how you perfect relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, how you perfect relationship with other people. The Keser Shem Tov is Ola al Gabehem, because it's, no matter how much you work on your own inherent, let's say, kahuna, the goal is the avoda. The goal is the action of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Keser Shem Tov, that is Ola al Gabehem, is the fact that avoda could have a limit. Sorry, kahuna could have a limit, but avoda doesn't. That's where I would like to see this conversation, convince you. I mean, I'm reading between the lines of the Maharal, so it may not be exactly what the Maharal is saying. Just like before, when I was asserting that the menorah's job is to represent thought, and therefore the ruach and the space that the Torah sits in, the Torah as a perfection itself sits in, and that's not where the Maharal is going either. I mean, that's clearly not where the Maharal is going. But maybe it is where the Maharal is going. If you remember the first week, where we looked at the two ways that Olal Gabeim was taken, one is that it's a necessary precondition, and the other one was, one was that was the goal, and the other one was that was greater. And I likened it to what we were saying about Torah, The Torah was a necessary precondition because without the self-perfection, you couldn't do the other two. And Moshe wanted to say that meant it was greater. Do you remember either of those conversations, or the guy who prepares the class remembers the class better?
The latter, he did mention it today, and I do find. I mean, I have to go back to the text, but there is a tension between whether the ground of Torah is more important or not, and as opposed to the ground of Shem Tov. Something that I just a small sideline. I was thinking is, which is a difference between how we think and how, let's say, some of the Goim think. Think of when if you go to the Romans, you name it, it's like the most important thing you can do is leave a good name. It's like you but it's not that much your action, like your living actions, is more like your posthumous actions. It doesn't really matter. It's like you want to be famous. It's like an end in itself.
Well,
Here
for a
it's
lot
not.
of right, because
A lot of people it is.
right, because
But
that's the pursuit of immortality, right? It's not
that's
really
right.
getting
Here,
a name for the sake of having a
ethics.
great relationship with everybody else, and that's reflected in how they think of you, right? It's having a name because the name will outlive your physical self.
That's right. There is not that much
It's about
sense of responsibility.
immortality. It's a very self-serving thing.
That's right. There's not that much sense of a responsibility for your fellow man. It's more a matter. I mean, they do place a stronger emphasis on virtue, but not that much on, let's say, what your obligation is to the other. I think that is a major difference. Just something I want to put out there.
I hear. Unfortunately, I have to wrap things up punctually this week.